All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call the special meeting of council to order for June 27th at 7 o'clock. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Any errors or omissions from the agenda is presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Ma, second by Councillor Hanson. I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. I will, right at the beginning, go into, sorry, actually, I double check. I haven't heard from Councillor Forbes yet. Councillor Forbes, are you on the line? We may not have a meeting yet.
Yes, I am on the line. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Councillor Forbes. So this meeting is being held in a hybrid format, which means that members of the public, council staff can participate in person or virtually. We do have a limited attendance right now at this point. Our requirement for quorum is 4 members of the council. We have 3 here in person, and we have Betty Forbes joining us virtually. Unfortunately, we have regrets from the 3 other members of council at this time. I will say, you know, as a parent, this is always the most chaotic week when school has just let out on Friday and you're trying to get everybody sorted out for summer activities and such. I don't know if that's the reason for all of them, but I know that they do all have kids in school and all are facing those challenges. But at this point, we have bare quorum. And so my warning to the members of council that are present participating is, we will need to suspend the meeting if you need to leave the room for any reason, and that's okay if you need to, but just that's what's going to happen if you do need to leave the room. We'll stop the meeting and resume the meeting at a later time. But short of that, this is an important meeting for us. What makes it special, and the agenda, it's called a special meeting of council, is that it wasn't on the original calendar back in December. And so that means that as we finish 1 year up, we approve the calendar for the next year for regular meetings of council and such. This one was not approved as a meeting at that time. We've added the meeting since that time. That's what makes it special. Now, we also have the liberty to treat it as a regular meeting or to treat it with its own regulations and rules simply by virtue of the fact that it may be called for one particular reason and may not look like a regular meeting of council. And so that's kind of what we have here. So tonight, the main purpose, obviously, is to receive the annual report, public input feedback for this evening's meeting. And so we're going to deal with that. It will have its own public input period. So we're not having a public input period at the front end of the meeting like we would normally do for regular. It will be at the item. And then also the second item on the agenda tonight is going to be a presentation from Mr. Stewart about council priorities for the upcoming term. And so, but first at this time, I do have a bit of a script that I'm going to read. We're going to treat the receipt of feedback for the annual report very much like we would for a public hearing, and that's with opportunities for the members of the public to make presentations. And so to that end, I have a script just like I would for a public hearing, and so I'm just going to read through that at this point. This special council meeting is being held to receive public submissions and questions on the 2022 annual report. It's being held in a hybrid meeting format, meaning there's a combination of in-person electronic participation by some or all members of council, staff, and the public. Section 99 of the Community Charter requires council to consider the annual report prepared under Section 98 of the Community Charter and receive submissions and questions from the public. The annual report must be considered at a council meeting or other public meeting, which brings us to this evening. There is no statutorily prescribed process, as with other consultations such as a public hearing. So the nature and extent of the public input opportunity is up to council. Accordingly, council has established the following rules for this public input opportunity. We will first go through the established speakers list. At the end of the speakers list, the chair may call for any other speakers not on the speakers list. You will have 5 minutes to address council. Begin your remarks by stating your name to the council. After everyone who wishes to speak has spoken, there will be an opportunity for speakers to have one additional 5-minute opportunity. Any additional speaking opportunities will only be allowed at the discretion of the chair and if time permits. If permitted, do not repeat information from your previous presentations and ensure your comments remain focused on the 2022 annual report. If you've provided a submission earlier in the process, there is no need to read it here as it will have already been seen by staff and summarized for council. All members of the audience are asked to be respectful of one another as diverse opinions are expressed. Council wishes to hear everyone's views in an open and impartial forum. Some important notes about this evening's meeting. Council is here to listen to the public, not to debate the content of the 2022 annual report. Council may ask clarifying questions of the speakers. Everyone wishing to speak will be provided an opportunity, and if necessary, we will continue the meeting on a second night. Finally, please note that this meeting is being held via Zoom and is being recorded in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Now, there was one item in the script I would like to confirm with you. It says, Council is here to listen to the public, not to debate the content of the 2022 annual report. Council may ask clarifying questions of the speakers. That's not our normal process for a public hearing, so I just wanted to double check that. Our staff, council are not cross-examining speakers. Council are asking clarifying questions of staff. Is that not correct?
Your worship, the charter is silent on that.
Okay.
And it's not a statutorily prescribed public hearing. So I think either applies. If there either from a presenter or an issue that needs to be clarified, perhaps misinformation has been stated, either flies. There's nothing, either is appropriate. There's nothing to police that to say it's inappropriate.
Yeah, and all that to say, when you look at the charter and how it does describe the meeting, it doesn't say a lot, but the intent really seems like small community town hall kind of thing, where people come up and ask a question. We do our best to answer it from the staff that are present, and ideally have answers on the spot wherever we reasonably can, versus a much more prepared discussion about the report. And so I'm going to try and create as much flexibility. If speakers have questions, I would like to address them on the spot wherever we reasonably can. If we can't address the questions on the spot, then it would be appropriate to write them down, note who it was, and then have a follow-up with commentary on those questions. So, all right. Councillor Ma, did you have a question about the procedures?
Yes.
Okay.
My understanding, public hearings, once it's closed, we're not to receive any information or talk about it. Does that apply in this situation?
No, there is no closure expectation at the end of this. The annual report is available for public discussion at any point during the course of the year. We do just carve out this extra special time to make sure that people are aware that it's been released, that aware of the content, and make sure that people have a specific opportunity to ask questions with staff present and put it on the public record. But absolutely, people can continue to ask questions about the annual report or what's not in the annual report or whatever the case may be throughout the course of the year. Okay, just checking back in. Any other further comments at this point? Are we going to have any, I believe, Ms. Walker, you have some opening comments for us to guide the discussion?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, Council, and members of the public joining us tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the original peoples of these lands and waters, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam, on whose unceded ancestral lands the District of North Vancouver is located. We value the opportunity to learn, share, and serve our community on these unceded lands. So as I mentioned this evening, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the report in front of you. Since this only occurs once a year, I'll make a brief presentation to orient Council and members of the public on the purpose of the meeting and the report. The Community Charter under Section 98 requires that each year prior to June 30th, Council prepare an annual report and make the report available for public inspection. The public has an opportunity to provide input on the annual report, and I can confirm that all statutory requirements have been met. There are specific Community Charter requirements. These requirements provide guidelines about the process and the content of the report. This slide shows the requirements. I think it's a little small for you to read, but I can just surmise that prior to June 30th, we must prepare an annual report for the previous year, make the report available for public inspection, and hold this annual meeting so Council can receive and consider public input. The annual report must include 5 specific elements: the audited annual financial statements referred to in Section 167 for the previous year, for each tax exemption provided by a council under Division 7 of Part 7, the amount of property taxes that would have been imposed on the property in the previous year if it were not exempt for that year, a report with respect to municipal services and operations for the previous year, and a statement of how we measured up to the objectives and measures established for the previous year, as well as a statement of future municipal objectives for the current and following year. And lastly, if there were any declarations of disqualification. The annual report was made available online at dnv.org annual report on Monday, June 5th. The entire report is available online in a printable PDF, and we also have hard copies available for pickup at Municipal Hall and at the libraries. All of the requirements have been met with respect to the audited financial statements and some of the other items I mentioned previously. For the past decade, we have taken an approach that is consistent by using the corporate plan as a reference to monitor how we've done on set objectives and to look forward. On a side note, the existing corporate plan concluded in 2022. The newly elected council has been working with senior staff to identify strategic priorities for council's 4-year term. And these will be reflected in a new corporate plan. The community charter also allows for council to provide additional information. And so in keeping with best practices, we have the mayor, CAO, and CFO provide a high-level summary of the year in review from their perspective. We include explanatory introductions regarding financial statements that finance staff provide, along with supplemental information in graphic and narrative formats to enhance understanding for the public. And lastly, activity measures to illustrate the breadth of municipal services and operations. In terms of meeting requirements, the charter says the report must be available for at least 2 consecutive weeks. The report was available as of June 5th, so we fulfilled that requirement. And ads were placed in the North Shore News for 3 consecutive weeks on June 7th, 14th, and 21st. The meeting notice, advertisements, and dnv.org all provided direction for how to participate and provide input into the meeting held tonight. Public submissions were encouraged in several formats. Council typically finds this information quite interesting, including the ability to engage with us directly on the annual report webpage, through Twitter, Facebook, and via email. So of note, we had 2 email submissions. It says 1, but we did receive 1 last minute. We had 1 through the public input platform. And as of noon today, we've received about 296 unique views to the webpage, 267. So that actually means that it's external visits to the site and it's not by the same person. Also, with respect to downloads, we've noticed that there was twice as many downloads of the annual report this year than compared to last year. So there were 166 downloads. All of the submissions will be responded to in a summary report that will be published on our website in July. In 2020, we reorganized our reporting around our 5 corporate goals to align further with our 2019 to 2022 corporate plan. Those goals include livability and mobility, fostering community, safety, health, and resiliency, leadership in climate emergency action and environmental management, achieving a balanced and fair economy, and supporting a sustainable and service-oriented organization. So these directions are translated into shorter-term objectives, which staff then deliver on through departmental work plans, and we continue to report on a consistent set of measures. We typically show 5 years of data, and for the 2nd year in a row, we've prepared a high-level executive summary of the corporate plan in response to feedback from the public, and we've added that to the annual report. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the staff that came together to produce this year's annual report. This slide just is an overview of the type of financial information available in the report. I won't speak any further to this slide, as Mr. Danlick is available if there are any questions for comments. Despite the challenges posed by the pandemic and the uncertain economic times, we made important progress on our 5 key goals, and we look forward to stabilization in the post-pandemic world. Some of the highlights include progress in supportive housing, extension of the cycling network in phase 1 of the Lynn Valley Active Transportation Project, the opening of Lions Gate Community Center, and construction on the Maplewood Fire and Rescue Center. The district is committed to advancing reconciliation at the local level, and we made significant progress on strengthening relationships with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation with the signing of the Relationship Protocol Agreement. We also launched a new sustainability grants program and received an award from Building Benchmark BC. Additionally, we amended the DCC bylaw to ensure charges are keeping pace with inflation, established a Business Services and Economic Development Department, made improvements in technology, and won an award for Report a Problem. And finally, once again, we were selected as one of BC's top employers for the 5th time. Looking ahead, as noted earlier, this is the last year of the previous corporate plan, and the newly elected council is in the process of identifying their strategic priorities for the 4-year term. Mr. Stewart will be addressing council strategic priorities for 2023 to 2026 following this presentation. This concludes my presentation for the evening. In terms of the annual reporting process, what remains tonight is an opportunity for public input at the required annual general meeting tonight. And typically what we've done in the past is the public have the opportunity to speak tonight, and staff are happy to follow up and respond to any questions from council and the public by email. As I noted earlier, there's going to be a summary page on our website, and that will just close the loop on the annual reporting process. It is now council's opportunity to consider the 2022 annual report and any public input. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I will just say that joining us online and in person, we do have staff representatives from transportation, finance, engineering, parks, and planning. And so hopefully we'll have all the resources in the room that we need to answer questions. Also, Chief Administrative Officer as well. So at this point, so we have a speakers list that was created ahead of time. This is for people who called the clerk's department noting that they wanted to speak. So I'm going to go through this list first, but then we'll immediately go back out and see if anybody else would like to speak either virtually or in person here for the meeting. So the first speaker I have is Susan Hyam, followed by John Lesso. And I believe they're both joining us here in person. So Ms. Walker, are you, there you go.
Sorry.
That's good. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the meeting.
Well, I'm disappointed. I had no idea that this would be so sparsely attended by members of council. So perhaps I'll have to come another time or more than another time. So
we will make sure that whatever record will be shared with the other 3 members of council before they consider the final report in July.
Thank you. So I realize this is pertaining, of course, to the report from you for 2022, but I'd like to talk about the environmental aspect of the policies that we have in place. And I thought for the benefit of the people who are new to council, I brought something from you, but if you don't mind, I'm going to read it. Okay?
Go ahead.
So we know the District of North Vancouver declared a climate and ecological emergency in July 2019. We are seeking, this is a job advertisement for a position here for quite a pretty healthy salary, I must say. We are seeking an experienced civic-minded leader to coordinate the district's response to the emergency in the newly created role of manager climate action, natural systems and biodiversity. This is an exciting time to join the district as we embark on a range of transformative initiatives, including digital service delivery, a call to climate action, and commitment to a livable and prosperous region. So, for example, Councillor Ma, have you read this yourself? Okay, so one person hasn't heard it. So this is an advertisement to get the position filled.
Yes.
And the role is reporting directly to the CAO. You will lead the district's initiatives in research, education, policy development, and implementation in alignment with key actions identified in the district's community energy and emissions plan of 2050. Climate action adaptation strategy. As a subject matter expert, you, the new person, will coordinate the district's response on climate action and sustainability while engaging key stakeholders, including council, staff, levels of government, and other community partners to ensure the success of multi-stakeholder projects. It's really good corporate speak. Anyway, so we go on about what the person is supposed to have. many degrees experience, 10 years experience, green roofs, green parking, working well on teams, all that kind of thing. And you're to have a degree in a master's preferred in a related field, etc. So this was advertised in well, we have the acknowledgement that we're in an emergency. If anybody listened to the news, CBC radio news today, I mean, things are not great. It's dire everywhere. So you declared the emergency in July 2019, 4 years ago. Then you advertised this position 6 months. It was filled on March 29th, 2021. So that's a year ago it was filled, the position, to sort of push forward your initiatives. So my question is, where's the leadership in terms of this new person who's going to be pushing the agendas forward? And also we hear this over and over when we look for enforcement of bylaws that you already have and they're never enforced. And I'm talking about noise, light, landscaping projects. And we always get the answer, we don't have staff. We don't have enough people to enforce the bylaws that we have put in place for this district. And I think it's absolutely terrible. I mean, I do a lot of reading, and anybody who's into reading about the environmental issues, insects, bats, birds, they can't tolerate massive cities with lights on all night. And so we're looking at houses in all our neighborhoods. The brand new houses all have soffit lighting, security lighting. It's as though we're living in a ghetto. We're not in a ghetto yet. And the same with noise emissions from loudspeakers, you name it, fans, whatever, 24/7. And it's just not acceptable. And this is from 2019 when we supposedly had an emergency. So I'm looking for initiatives, I'm looking for leadership, and I'm looking for implementation of the bylaws that you already have. Do something, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the person who was hired in that position is on the call, but I think your question is more about our ability to get the position hired and get them in. Mr. Stewart, do you have a comment about that?
She's being hired.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're on the call.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm talking to her.
We have hired not only, sorry, we have hired not only the manager, but the supporting staff. And I'm pleased to have Carolyn follow up with you to let you know we've been providing regular updates to council. And actually the group has made a lot of really good progress in a fairly short time. I would say that they're completely supported by the organization in general and right through in all aspects of the organization. We're making progress there, and I'd be delighted to have her get in touch with you and let her know what exactly what you've been doing. So
She doesn't need to get in touch with me. She needs to get the bylaw officers out there enforcing the bylaws that we have.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, the next speaker I have is John Lesu, followed by Eric Skronik. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you've got 5 minutes to address the meeting.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. John Lesso, North Vancouver. I'd like to follow up on a subject that I've been covering for the past year, but it deals with the failure to enforce parking regulations and issue citations to violators, which has a direct impact on district budget and revenues. This is an update from an email I sent you on April 15th and also testified to, the subject line of which was, how much money has the district wasted over the past 3 years driving small businesses from West 15th between Lloyd and Pemberton? Specifically, just to refresh your memory, those businesses were Arrow Rentals, Computer Guy Sales and Service Repair, Sal's Auto Repair, Daisy's Cafe, and Linus Industries. The space occupied by these former thriving commercial enterprises is now vacant and not producing any tax revenues for the district. Now, on June 15th, short time ago, I had an appointment at Pemberton Auto, 1110 West 15th, to have my car serviced. Upon arrival, there were no parking spaces on either side of 15th between Lloyd and Pemberton. And this was despite the fact that over the past 2 months, these 5 businesses have left the area, as previously documented. The one ongoing factor in causing these vacancies was the continuing practice of John Hussar of Van Wunder Auto Services at 1141 West 15th to permanently store his 8 to 10 private vehicles in public parking spaces on either side of West 15th between Lloyd and Pemberton. To continue the story, I parked my vehicle in a no parking space while attending at Pemberton Auto and discussing the service of the car with manager Chris Roper. And during that time, my wife had to circle the block several times to pick me up because there was no place for her to park. Now, in the email I sent you today are photos, additional photos showing the sorry condition of West 15th since the introduction of your back-end parking that was mandated last year by the district, including the new DNV sign, which had been knocked completely out of the ground by a vehicle that was following the new back-end rules. And on a more serious note, I also included the card of RCMP Constable Ross Doyle, which references file 22-11-422. Constable Doyle was called to a business on West 15th in response to a trespass and assault by John Hussar at a business owner's premises just across the street. The business owner was photographing the parking infractions by Van Wunder. Now, council members, you need to follow up on the particulars of the RCMP report to verify the details. I lay the blame for this incident directly on the District of North Vancouver for their continuing failure to enforce their own parking regulations, despite numerous complaints from businesses in the area. Your neglect has created a hostile commercial environment for the remaining businesses. And I submit that remedial action, which I've been talking about for over a year, would have been easy by first changing the signage to no overnight parking and starting to enforce parking violations by John Hussar and collecting the fines. I'm also submitting for the record a thumb drive. This confirms John Hussar's continuing abuse of parking regulations over the past 3 years and counting, which has resulted in the exodus of businesses from the area. There are over 300 photographs on that thumb drive. Photographs of vehicles belonging to Van Wunder occupying public parking spaces over the past 3 years in violation of parking ordinances. And what it boils down to is this. John Hussar of Van Wunder has used public parking spaces on both sides of West 15th openly and continuously for parking his private vehicles for years, to the detriment of local businesses who rely on short-term parking access for their customers. Start enforcing your parking ordinances. This could result in a return of businesses to the area, as well as revenue for the district if scofflaws like John Hussar are finally forced to pay their fines and cease using the public street as a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker I have is Eric Skarnek, joining us here in person. And after this presentation, that's the end of the list. And so at that point, I'm going to be going back out to the participants and see if anyone else would like to add their comments at that time. But at this point, welcome, Eric. You have 5 minutes to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I don't know, it sounds like a bit of a broken record. My primary issue tonight will be non-enforcement of bylaws. In a couple of different areas. Number one deals a little bit with environmental management, and that's the bylaws that deal with paving over front yards. I walk around quite a bit, and just about every day I see somebody there with a cement truck paving over somebody's front yard, but I believe the bylaws require a certain percentage, depending on the area. In different areas, it's different percentages, 30%, 40%, whatever, of the front yard be non-hardscape. And it seems like everybody just paves them all over because they don't have a lawnmower or something, and they don't want to cut the grass, or they want to park 36 cars there, or who knows why. But that, to my mind, is the kind of project that perhaps the district could sort of get a start on, similar to what they did when we had the drought condition and you hired a summer student to go around driving around. And I know some friends of ours got a nasty letter that said that their sprinklers were spraying a little bit onto the street. They were livid, but you know, if that's the rules, they got to stay on the property, they should stay on the property. By a like token, they could identify those people and district could contact them and say that you got to fix it. You know, the bylaw says X and you've got Y, so give them some time to fix it. The other issue that I have is parking, and that's the enforcement of parking. It would seem the few times that I've had some interaction with the bylaw department that they're very reluctant to issue tickets or almost anything. Now, I'm thinking since the role of council is to provide guidance and direction and policy for the different departments, that for whatever reason, this is council's policy. But I mean, my feeling is if we have bylaws, we should enforce them. If it's not appropriate to enforce them, then let's repeal them. Just get rid of them. Then there's, you know, there's no sort of, what word am I looking for? No ambiguity about what happens. Either you do it or you don't. And one of the things is parking in Edgemont Village. People do what I call make spots, where there are designated parking stalls, and at the end of the line, there's a little triangle that's sort of hash marked off. They park there because it's convenient. If you look down the street, about a block away, there's parking stalls, but that's not really that convenient. It's easier to park here, so they just park there. Seldom see that enforced. People are backing into parking stalls, which I believe there's a bylaw contrary to that in angle parking, especially in light of the fact that there was a recent study, I don't know, about 3 months ago, came out from UVic that fumes are hazardous to people, especially so when you back cars in, you're closer to residential areas, closer to stores where people can possibly breathe those in. Another one that never seems to be enforced, or I haven't seen it enforced, is over-length vehicles parked in angle parking. I believe there's a bylaw, I don't know, 17.5 feet or something like that. A lot of these new delivery vans are a lot longer than that. And it just seems like there's a reluctance to do that. Another issue that we have in Edgemont Village is Amica. Probably 5 or 6 trucks a day park, sometimes against traffic direction, in a no stopping zone, not a no parking zone. I understand bylaws give people in a no parking zone 15 minutes grace period, but in a no stopping zone, purportedly there is 0 grace period. No stopping if it says no stopping. If it says no parking, they'll let you park there for 15 minutes and won't give you anything. So, oh, my time's just about up. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just definitely agree. I'm seeing the theme here tonight. You know, I know that on the Amica one, they have a loading dock and they're supposed to use the loading bay, not supposed to use the street. And so I'll make sure that we have staff follow up again on that matter. Wondering, Mr. Milburn, can you speak to permeable surfaces on single family lots and the requirements at the time of building permit, but when it's just a re and re of a driveway, what do we do in those situations?
Yeah, thank you, Worship.
Microphone, please.
Thank you, Worship. There are some standards for paving surfaces, maximum paving area within front yards. And it's an important one in terms of ensuring that we have a stormwater flow into the ground and also an aesthetic control. So it is important. Of course, as you note, verified as part of a building permit review. We typically don't then do inspections of all properties in the district after that fact. But if there is a complaint that is raised to our attention, staff will follow up. in that particular circumstance as I noted, is important. And we have heard the other concerns raised tonight with respect to general comments. And we can certainly provide an update to council with respect to the amount of enforcement activity that is ongoing, amount of tickets issued and so on. I think that might be a useful update for council to understand the amount of enforcement that is ongoing now.
Yeah, I can tell you because typically the people who get tickets contact my office as seeking some grace, we'll say. And so I can tell you there's a lot of enforcement going on right now in organics bins with the bears coming out of hibernation issues, plus also parking in Deep Cove and Kate's Park. I know I'm definitely getting a lot of people who have received tickets in those areas, but we can provide a better, more comprehensive report on enforcement activities at a future public meeting, because I think that sounds like that's of great importance to people. So thank you for raising it. At this point, I have no further speakers on the list. And so I'm going to look to everybody. Would raise your virtual hand if you'd like to join the meeting, or if anybody else here in the room. I've got Kelly Bond joining us here inside the council chamber as a first-time speaker. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the meeting when you're comfortable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, so this is going to be highly spontaneous, so excuse my stutters. I think I am one of the 2 emails that you received previously on this, and I had emailed concerning building permit delays on single-family homes, and I'll watch for the response in the weeks to come on that. But I realized this evening as I sat here that I would be remiss at the end of the former council's term, 2018 to 2022, without speaking to this week, the highly anticipated occupancy of Emery Village. And as you'll recall, that is a rezoning that saw the displacement of 61 families from Lynn Valley. And this week we're seeing those being those 42 units of below market and 42 units of market housing beginning to be filled with families. So that's an exciting time. I'm looking forward to, I understand that planning will be conducting, or I hope they still are planning to do that, some town center surveys. So it will be important to see if we can do a post-occupancy survey at that location on Emery Court to see how the tenant relocation plans, first right of refusal has come, and if it's been effective as a policy here at the district, and if there's changes to be made. And also, if those below market units are benefiting those that we were concerned that are missing from our municipality, those children that are living in their parents' basements, the young adults, that the 25 to 40-year-olds that we have previously said can't afford to live here. It'll be interesting to see if those have housed those people from our community, and the service industry folks as well that are needing housing. So that, admittedly, you know, it's been an emotional 4 or 5 years since that rezoning, but it's pleasing to see the benefits that have come to the community, including, I think it's $1 million worth of money towards those sewer line replacements. When we drive through there, we know that that was in a way on the backs of some of those families that were displaced from there. And there's $11 million in CACs that came from that are benefiting the greater community. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I finally wanted to thank the former council for their efforts towards affordable housing in this community. I know some of the projects remain stagnated due to regulatory delays, Delbrook, 16th Street, Lloyd Avenue. But there's great potential coming forward. We have the potential Metrovan project that would be a few years out yet, but great strides have been made. And I think it's important to note that as we've been told by the province that we need to build more, I think The previous council did a great job towards that. And I look forward very much to this council's coming term and the actions towards affordable social housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, would anybody else like to address the meeting? I have a virtual hand from Corey Cost. We can, we're just going to move you over to the panel, Dr. Cost here. It'll just take us a few seconds. And then perhaps we can also move Mr. Colbert over as the next virtual speaker after that. Okay, Corey Cost, I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Your Worship.
Welcome.
I did send something earlier. I guess it's best to have something share screen as well. I'll share the screen here of material notes that I had. I'm not sure if it's coming up or not.
It looks like it's starting to pop up. Yes.
Good. That'll be essentially
So,
contents.
is there any way you can zoom it in a little bit? It'd be very hard for anybody to read it at that size, but
Okay, yes. I
it's
think-
letterboxed, so it's only showing some of it, but if that's the best that it can be.
Oh, no, I'm sure we can improve it. How's this? That.
Oh, that's better. Yeah,
With the size? Okay, yes.
that helps.
Well, before I start, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that these are my views and not of any organization that I may belong to. Just to clarify that. I just do want to remark from a personal point of view, before I forget this, is that I too have trouble putting my sprinklers out. This is not an automated sprinkler system where you can adjust it precisely where things should go. I put it out the best I can, but as you know, the prevailing winds can have a big influence on where the spray of your water goes. And I must say, occasionally I do spray some of it on the street, and it's just impossible to prevent other than you water only about half your lawn. So I hope that there's some sympathetic views in the bylaw enforcements on overspraying on the street. People do try their best to not do that and waste water. Now, as for some comments on the annual report, the 2022 inclusion of the executive summary, which was requested by some last year, finally came through this year. I think I heard that this is the second year, but there was no such executive summary, in my opinion, last year. And this is the first time that this has taken place. And I think it's a good feature and much appreciated. Those are pages 3 and 5 of the current report. Now, the work continues on the North Shore wastewater, and this is taken directly from the 2019 report, in which they say it has now been designed to provide tertiary treatment and one of the biggest civic investments on the North Shore's history. So this is big bucks kind of project. And the North Shore wastewater treatment plant, which is on Pemberton, the excavation permit was issued, as they said in the report, of 2019. And then in 2019, it says, well, while expenses are projected to increase considerably over the next 5 years, and that was the bad news that will eventually sink the project to its current state, due to regional and extreme pressures, including the impacts of the new North Shore wastewater treatment plant, the district's rate stabilization policy will mitigate these impacts. And then that was 2020. In 2021, the almost exact same thing was published with one small word added, the word project. that was missing from the previous case. And the following year, in 2022, was this current, the exact same thing as in the previous year. There's absolutely no update at all. We are completely in the blind what has happened in the last 2 years. But I can tell you, there's plenty of rust that you see if you go down the street where they are allegedly going to have to build a new facility. Now, I've recently become more aware of certain risks. This is a different topic. Risks is a big topic to me because as ultimately it falls on the residents of the district. If there are risks that come about which are not covered by insurance policy, which may be excessive to cover certain kinds of risks that may be needed. So they mainly relate to the manufacture, storing, and distribution of chemicals in the industrial area of Maplewood. Now, I'm not at liberty to provide any more details, since that would maybe compromise the public hearing that took place recently. And so I leave it to council to address this risk issue. I think it's important that that be addressed. Now, due to sharp increases in construction costs of new homes, the taxes on existing, not exiting, sorry, mistake there, older homes like my own have actually dropped a bit. So thank you very much. We always like a little bit of relief in our taxes. And it's always nice that people are building much more expensive homes, which shift me down the ladder of the expense. Now, I would like to see free access. This is another issue of accessing the rooms that they book in the libraries across the district. Usually we had for generations, actually, for decades, access to our local Highland Edgemonte library, and from 7 to 9 p.m. on certain days. But now, instead, you're only allowed to go from 6 to 8 p.m. That's very inconvenient for our membership. They're just still having supper. And we would like that free for community access to be changed to better match the needs of the community from 7 to 9 p.m. the way it was in pre-pandemic days.
So, Dr. Koss, I'm just going to interrupt for a sec. So we're at 6.5 minutes. I'd like to take just a break there so I can respond to some of the items. And then I do have another speaker and we can come back to you for an additional speaking time at that point. But I did just want to say, yes, if we can get, again, reminder the specifics on the rooms you want to rent from the community association. I'm sure we can work on that directly with the library and figure out a way around that. The issue you raised with the wastewater treatment plant is an incredibly important one for us. So the plant was over 2 years behind schedule and over $300 million over budget at the time we terminated the contract with the previous partner. And obviously, once you terminate, then you end up in court proceedings, and things don't progress at an acceptable rate. We're also watching the escalator in construction hit us very hard at this point. We definitely, Metro Vancouver has said that they're willing to come and do a presentation to our council in a public meeting about the state of the wastewater treatment plant. They did, however, just do a public meeting recorded and available, and the public was welcome to attend, have a meeting at the Liquid Wastewater Committee meeting last month, going over all of those details. And so if it's something you're interested, I'd recommend you go to the Metro Vancouver website, metrovancouver.org, and go to the boards and committees page, and you can watch the video from last month's Liquid Wastewater Committee meeting. And sorry, it would be this month's. It's the one at the beginning of June. And in it, they do a very fulsome discussion of the project going back to when it was at the indicative design stage and all the way through to the termination of the contract and where we currently sit. I do want to take advantage of the offer for them to come and speak to our council, but the problem is always one of timing. The last time they came and spoke to the district council about the project, 2 weeks after they came to the council and said everything's progressing and fine, they fired the contractor 2 weeks later. And so they were in a situation where they couldn't talk about in-camera issues and details, and so they had to give a fairly plain vanilla version of events. And so I'm trying to get the timing right so that they can actually release as much information as they can. So the presentation that was released this month at the Liquid Wastewater Committee for Metro Vancouver has all of the public details that they can release at this time. What we were also told in that meeting was that while they can, in the July meeting, they are going to start talking about future steps and how this matter is going to be moving forward. We will not have clear, detailed financial commitments until we get into likely October of this year. And in part, the reason for that is that the paradigm in construction in Lower Mainland has shifted a tremendous amount. The design build finance contract that was entered into originally with this agreement largely doesn't happen anymore because it does not adequately protect the organization from risk. What you're likely to see going forward on this project and these kinds of large mega projects is them broken down into sub projects so that we can have different contractors bidding on different pieces of it and therefore spreading the risk across different organizations. And so getting a construction company to sign on the dotted line about guaranteeing costs in a budget in the current environment with the interest and escalator rates the way they are, you have to pay a tremendous premium to get them to agree to it. And so it's going to take us some time to get that final number. I've been told that October is when you're likely to have detailed costed out with a firm agreement at that time. And so what I was considering is, since we've just had the public meeting with the Metro Vancouver with the Liquid Waste Committee, and it has all the details there, that I was going to wait until the October financial update to press Metro Vancouver to come to our council. Then they will have to do the discussion with the finances on the table. Before October, it will not be made public, and you'll really only be getting half a presentation. This is, of course, great interest to our residents because at the moment there is no agreement on how the cost overruns of the project are going to be paid for. Under the agreement that created the wastewater treatment plant project in the first place, the whole sewerage area of Metro Vancouver was responsible for a portion. There were grants from the federal and provincial government for a portion, and then the municipalities were the sub area, which is the North Shore municipalities, were there to pick up the remainder. And the challenge is, what do you do with overages? What do you do with overages when they're in the hundreds of millions of dollars? And so we need to get certainty on what the North Shore sub area's contribution is going to be through your utility charges. And we currently do not have that protection from the region. And there's some matter of debate about if we actually do want protection from the region or not, because it means that we'll be responsible for the overages of the 10 times the size Iona plant in Vancouver, which is coming next. So, but my intent is to, in October, have Metro Vancouver come and do a presentation about the wastewater treatment plant, hopefully with the final numbers or close to final numbers at that point. At this point, I do have another speaker on the list, and so I'm going to go to Hazen Colbert, and then we'll return back for second-time speakers after that point. So, Mr. Colbert, can you hear me?
Sí, Presidente Little, entiendo. Por favor, buenas noches, Presidente Little, soy Hazen Colbert. Quiero hablar esta noche en el sitio en español. Do you understand what I've just said?
Me hablo un poquito español, but there's no way I could keep up with what you're possibly presenting.
So please understand that I am fluent in Spanish. This is a very important issue. Mayor Little in council and all the other speakers. This is important because of the discussion that Dr. Corey Cost has had presenting information with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. And I'm now going to speak only in English because I don't want to confuse people. Mayor Little, everything that you have said is actually, previously is actually 100% true. The advantage I have is that for well over a year, in fact, over 18 months, I've had conversations with the Chicago office of the Chicago office, and also the Spain office with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. The position that they have had in Spanish is diametrically opposed to the position that the Metro Vancouver has, and diametrically opposed to the position that you have spoken to tonight. And I don't say that you are right or wrong. All I'm saying is they are diametrically opposed. The litigation in British Columbia is going to take at least a decade. The dollar amount that started at 300 million is probably closer to 500 million. All I want to say is I think that this issue needs to be properly presented. The risks need to be properly presented to the District of North Vancouver. And what's very important that I now say is these risks were probably not properly assessed way back in 2014. They should have been. And they were not properly assessed by the people back in 2014, after, by the way, Mayor Little, that you left council. And so this is not anything that is hanging on you, even though you now have to fix it. It's hanging on two very significant people. One of them now has escaped into the ether. It's Mayor Richard Walton. And there's another person that is sitting here in council tonight, and his name is Dave Stewart. And I say this because a year ago, and Dave Stewart spoke a year ago, and actually it's almost exactly 12 months ago when Dave Stewart spoke to both Peter Teven, who was a candidate for council, and for me. I will quote his exact words with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. It's being managed, and it's being managed well. I'm not going to be critical about what Dave Stewart said. I'm only going to say that in my life, when you have a $300 to $500 million overage, you better be managing it every day, not through casual conversation. Okay. And I did not want to say this tonight other than I needed to do it because I know great detail, because I can read the Spanish reports out of Chicago and out of Spain. I'm going to now move to two things very quickly, because I don't say, I want to say we. During the last 5 years, the District of North Vancouver has stated we are in a climate emergency. And I'm going to now ask for this council to look at pages 102 and 104 of the annual report, which has to do with emissions, CO2 emissions from the District of North Vancouver, and recycling in the District of North Vancouver, recycling on a per household basis. It is shocking to me, given the massive amount of attention and dollars that page 102 shows there's been no reduction. In fact, the CO2 emissions from the District of North Vancouver have gone up. I'm going to wait. No, I'm going to skip this because I want Corey to come back. Thank you, Mayor Little and Council.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. I don't know that I have a specific question for staff on that at this point, but I think that I didn't catch which report on page 102. Mr. Colbert, did you say which report it was referenced on page 102? On which one? Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll look into that. Okay, so returning back to the speakers, would anybody else like to address the meeting for a first or second time? And I believe Dr. Cost, you indicated you would like to speak an additional time and so we have. Can we just make sure we keep Mr. Colbert and Dr. Cost over as panelists so that we don't have to keep shuffling back and forth? That'd be great. Dr. Cost, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
I can clearly. Welcome. You have another 5 minutes to address the meeting.
Okay. Well, I'll have to share screen again. More or less continue where I left off.
Sure.
I don't know. It seems to take. Oh, there finally.
Yeah. It looks like it's launching now. There you go.
Yes. Good. Okay. Well, I think we just let's go. Yes, I discussed already the taxes dropping. A little hard to do this. So I think we talked about network goes to the shop. Okay, that's good. Free
I think you'd already passed that part. Yeah.
This and funding. Okay, funding and road space provided to various transportation modalities and the different modes of transport should be done on the sort of scientific basis. And we did this in the Netherlands, and it was somewhat unpopular with certain groups that they are funded or given resources proportional to the people kilometers use for that particular modality. So of course, cars are highly dominated. They should logically have the greatest share of the public rights of way. So I keep that general principle in front of me when actual funding comes up, and council may wish to discuss that principle as well. The DCC charges for residential developments should include the true cost of providing park space to continue, as I've said for years, in many years now, to continue to cannibalize our existing park space is really subsidizing growth instead of having growth pay its own way. And I think the amount involved is in the hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidy. Oh, by the way, if you got the news recently, the new mayor of Toronto wants, quote, safe, well-managed and affordable housing as its principal goal, which I think should be more or less what we should have as well. Bottom gets cut off here, other things, so it's a little more difficult to manage what is here. I need to anyway, the District of North Vancouver archives our council meeting material in the past, certainly well before 2020. It should be made available to the public. I urge that again. I just request that again. I think they're useful material there that pertains to today, especially if you want to look at ownership maps of where the district ends and where the city of North Vancouver starts. The next slide is the asset sustainability indicators as shown on page 116 of the current report, along with the useful life for each category as shown in 29. So the two go very nicely hand in hand, and they're much appreciated. I think We talked about them last year, and it's really nice to see these sustainable indicators and how well they're doing. Now, if I could only relate to them to see how much money is actually spent on each asset, I know the total is 46 million, and somewhere there's a percentage, but it would be nice to have a table or a column saying how much money you're spending on each of these assets. But according to the last paragraph on page 116, we are not spending enough to be in a steady state, and that's really important. Now, it might be useful to show a chart, the one on page 104 of the which has the municipal taxes per dwelling unit instead of the per capita. The Surrey has, in fact, the lowest per capita, but I think the reason is the lowest per capita is not that their accommodations are cheap, but it's likely because the average number of occupants in them is much larger than ours. They also tend to have really larger homes. So before I finish, please, Your Worship, put the link of the presentations about the sewage plant that you were talking about by other jurisdictions. It would be very convenient to go to our District North Vancouver website and have a link there, maybe on the front page for a while, to focus on that very important presentation. All in all, I think I found this quite a useful report, and I added to it some more information, which I got through ChatGPT, about how these annual meetings should take place and what sort of expectations you should have in their discussion. I hope you find that useful. So that is my presentation, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak a little bit over time.
Thank you very much for your thoughtful presentation. Do appreciate the effort that you put in to review the annual plan. Okay, I believe the next speaker I have is a second-time speaker, Hazen Colbert.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Little. How are you doing tonight?
Welcome. I did just want to follow up with you at the tail end of your comments. I was just trying to find the source of that greenhouse gas emission increase, and I think I found it on page 100. Is that the one you're referring to? Of the
Well,
annual report?
Mike, I used page 102.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm gonna,
over to you.
No, yeah. So Mayor Little, I'm going to leave to you and council to address page 102 and page 104 in the July summary that the general manager of corporate services says. Because I'm not an expert on these things. I'm always, I got to rely on you guys. And there's one thing I do want to say, Mayor Little, with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. One of the things that I did do is I did a little bit of research into the lawyer who is representing Acciona, however you want to pronounce that in Acciona. This guy is he is actually the leading infrastructure litigation attorney in North America. So all I want to say to you guys is, if you want to fight against him, and I'm not saying it to you guys, if Metro wants to go up against him, because I got to, James Hansen, because James Hansen's going to know this. You want to go up against the leading infrastructure attorney in the continent, you're not going to rely on in-house counsel for Metro Vancouver. I gotta tell you, please don't do that, because you're just going to be wiped out. But there's I'm going to go on to a couple of other things, and I don't need any answers tonight. What I would like to ask is that there are a couple of other issues, and I'm going to ask that these issues be addressed. In the annual report, in the revenues, there were land sales of approximately $7.1 million land sales, and they were included as regular revenues. And so I would only want to see an answer. I'll give you Andy, some time. Land sales, technically, I'm, please understand, I don't know any of this. I'm just a novice guy here. Land sales, I don't think are the core of running the District of North Vancouver. So land sales should not be recognized as regular revenue. They should be extraordinary items. So I'm going to ask, you guys can deal with this. Again, I don't understand this. So Andy's the expert. Okay, so I put that to him. The other thing is there was a decision that was reached during the last fiscal year, which the District of North Vancouver had gone to court and they won. Which I have to say I completely agree with the decision. And they won a decision which was $7.1 million, and that $7.1 million has been included in revenues for this year. But my problem is, has the $7.1 million actually been paid by the other party? And if it has, given that the nature of the legal issue was that it was spread out over several years, why wasn't it allocated to each year as opposed to being put into 1 year? Again, I'm not knowledgeable about this. I mean, I with all due respect, I can barely walk into my house and turn on the lights. So again, I rely on Andy to explain this because I think that if there's a $7.1 million extraordinary gain in taxes, it should be spread out or allocated over the years that it took place. The other thing I want to say, it's because there was a matter that occurred last fall, and it started in early November, and it occurred in Lynn Valley. According to the metrics I have, which are not perfect, there were 7 times in Lynn Valley that the power went out. Now, I can't say that's what I've been told, 7. I can confirm there were 5 times the power went out in Lynn Valley between November the 1st and December 24th last fall. 5 times for certain. I know that because I was here. Why did that happen? Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Mr. Colbert. I think that's fair. We probably should review the stability of our power system. And I don't know, Mr. Milburn, do you have any comments about it? I mean, we had the wind events in that month that caused a number of businesses all the way from the Superstore all the way up until Lynn Valley to shut down. That whole section of the grid shut down. And I know a number of those businesses had to do insurance claims for coverage. I think it was a variety of sources between mechanical malfunction and trees coming down. One of them specifically was a tree wiping out the feed into the substation. So it took specialized crews that they had to bring in from out of region in order to be able to address that one. But I think it's a fair point that we definitely as a municipality have a role in making sure that the power supply in our community is adequate and reliable. So I think that's definitely fair. Can we stop putting Mr. Colbert back to an attendee? I think he's going to be, there you go. But I did want to say that you raised the issue of the C-SPAN case. I still can't really go into too many details except to say that the matter is still being determined before the courts. There are avenues for appeals, and so I think you can draw from that the money is not in hand necessarily, but it is fair question as to since the origin of the money was multiple different years' budgets, how will we account for the repayment of that ultimately when we do have the cash in hand? So I think that's a fair point as well. Okay, I'll come back in just a second. So just checking back in with the room. Would anybody else like to address the meeting a first, second, or now third time? So I have Eric followed by Hazen Colbert. So Eric, come on up to the desk for a second time speaking, please.
Thank you. Eric Skronik, Woodbine Drive, North Vancouver. Just a quick comment relative to development in the district. District isn't alone. The city, in my opinion, is just as derelict. A lot of new sort of multifamily developments are being approved, in my opinion, with insufficient parking available. With the prices of housing these days, a lot of people are doubling up. So there's 1, 2, 3 cars. And there seems to be this, I don't know, feeling that there's a lot of harm done by introducing a lot of parking spaces. Now, this is only my personal opinion. There's no harm for having extra parking spaces. The developers will whine that it costs them more money, but that's not de facto harm. That's just more money. And that we have an insufficient number. And all of these things are spilling out onto the streets and into residential areas where people are looking for parking because there aren't enough parking spots with those. And one other quick comment with a sort of aside that was given to me by someone else that I was talking to. We've been nominated by the province to produce a significant amount of housing. Now, along with this, given the fact that the North Shore has certain access and egress problems, has the district asked the provincial government to provide a third crossing for us as a trade-off for all this? If you're going to bring all these people over here, we should have a third crossing, which if they want all the housing here, maybe they should pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. We definitely have a very live discussion amongst the council about the issue of the appropriate amount of parking. We want to, where we can, allow people to not have to pay for parking if they don't need parking. And so we have some unbundled capacity where you can get units without parking. Because the assumption is if you make it free and easy for people to park a car, they're more likely to park a car or drive a car on our local streets. And so where we can do traffic demand management with the buildings, we try to. So in areas where we have frequent and reliable transit, if a proponent comes forward with an option to have car shares or other alternatives, some of the developments, actually we had a development proposal, actually my enclosure on that one there the other day. Well, anyway, we've had proposals that have included bus passes being included in the new units that go into them as well as an alternate way to support the residents without having them have cars. So it's a very active, hot discussion with the council as to what that number is, because if you underbuild it, it becomes hard to fill the units. And if you overbill it, then it makes the unit cost so high that it's very hard for the projects to proceed. So we're trying to strike the right balance, but I hear your concern. There's no question that some of the areas are completely overburdened with parking cars throughout them in the evening, making it very hard to enjoy some of the local businesses in those neighborhoods because there's no parking. The second question you had, or the second comment, I prattled on and I can't remember what your second comment. Third crossing, yes. The third crossing, well, I definitely have been in the media talking about the direct connection between an accelerated growth in the community and accelerated investment in infrastructure by the provincial government. I think you absolutely need to tie in rapid transit development and infrastructure improvements in our community in order to be able to properly support additional housing in our community. We haven't had a lane increase since 1968. I've been saying that as much as I can throughout the community to try and get it across that our infrastructure is derelict to the compared to the number of people who live here. Our population has more than doubled since that 1968 number. But there has been at this point no commitment from the provincial government to fund either our transit or our bridge infrastructure needs for our community. And so that will form a major part of the discussion that we have with the provincial government as they bring forward this Housing Supply Act program. So we definitely will be addressing that issue. Next speaker that I have is a third time, Hazen Colbert.
Mayor Little, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Great. What I want to say to you is, to this council and to the people that are listening and to the Mayor Little and also to the provincial government. Perhaps I'm a unique person. See, I've lived here in the district of North Vancouver for now 14 years, which is far greater than times that I have lived elsewhere. Okay? And when Mayor Little talks about we need to have, I made an error. When Mayor Little says we have an infrastructure deficit, he could not be more accurate. I have lived in other places where it is shocking to me that in comparison, that the province, actually not just the province, but the federal government wants to expand our population, but we're going to rely on 2 bridges. Sorry. So I'm going to give just one example. I'm going to give 2 examples. Many years ago, I lived in Ottawa. The population of Ottawa today is 1 million people. And it's on the Ontario side of the border with Quebec. On the Quebec side, it's Gatineau. They have a population of 200,000 people. It's 1.2 million people. Do you know how many bridges there are between Ottawa and Gatineau? Mike already knows the answer. Mike already knows this. It's 6 bridges. Mike knows this, okay? And I'm so thrilled that you recognize this, Mike. 6 bridges. We have 2 bridges. Now, what Mike does not know, I've lived in certain other places, including Hong Kong, okay? It is so bizarre that we are told you have to take buses. You got to spend like an hour and a half to cross the Burrard Inlet. I've lived in Hong Kong a short time between 2001 and 2003. I could jump on the MTR and in less than 10 minutes go from the mainland to the island. 10 minutes. Now, I know the populations there are greater, but guess what? When that MTR was built, the populations were not overwhelming. That MTR was built because the government said, we need to build out the population on the mainland. And what I really like tonight is that our mayor recognizes this stuff. He recognizes this stuff more than anybody. We can't continue to build out housing, commercial business, and anything else on the North Shore if the only thing we're going to rely on is express buses from Phibbs Exchange. And I don't say that I'm an expert in planning. What I do say is I've been around the world, and Mayor Little is so right. Please support him. He is so right on this. If I don't speak another word at a council meeting for the next 5 years, please listen to him, because he could not be more accurate. And now I'm done. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much for your comments. It is one of the biggest issues facing our community. You hear about it every day, and so we want to make sure we're putting the appropriate effort into addressing that issue. Okay, would anybody else like to address the meeting a first, second, or third time? Ms. Hyam, a second time. Welcome.
I'd just like to know if we could have some facts. For example, I'm back on the bylaw enforcement bylaws, many bylaws. How many persons are actually employed to do this kind of work? I know there's traffic, the parking people, they go around, look after parking, but what about the people who are supposed to be called or be aware of noise infractions, light trespass? And worst of all is what I call the creek beds, which are laid out on boulevard property, district property, as a landscaping concept. We've finished with the creek beds quite a lot now. We have plastic grass, but that isn't within our bylaws yet. Again, 5 years ago when we thought we had an emergency, did anyone say that we should ban plastic grass, fake grass, as a landscaping feature? No, I mean, it's pathetic. I hate to be so negative, but I would like to see more leadership from you, our council, telling us what we should and shouldn't do. And I'm sorry, I'm quite willing to do it if you have reasonable bylaws and reasonable approaches to the problems that we have. So my question is, do we have enough enforcement staff? Because it does relate to your budget. That's the question.
I don't know if we have statistics on hand tonight for what we have in terms of staff working in those fields. I mean, obviously within enforcement, we have parks rangers, animal welfare, and people who do general duty, which I think is what you're after, but I don't know what numbers you have on the spot, Mr. Milburn.
Thank you, Worship. In terms of the bylaw services group, which has a limited range of enforcement, because we have a bit of a distributed enforcement model that does include, as you mentioned, park rangers, staff that look after issues of solid waste, as well as water conservation. In terms of bylaw officers, we have about 15 full-time equivalent staff members. And that number fluctuates. We have auxiliaries, and then we increase those numbers over busy periods to try to adjust to the service demands. I'm not sure if Mr. Stewart has the numbers on the total of other bylaw staff, but I think it's around another 8 to 10. And again, that fluctuates and increases in the summer months, especially with the park rangers.
Well, I think we're up to 12 park rangers at the moment. And then ultimately also our local RCMP detachment is amongst their priorities. They can respond and write tickets on bylaw enforcement. They tend to not rank bylaw as high as we would like sometimes, but they definitely have the capability to write a ticket under our bylaw rules. Mr. Stewart, do you have any additional comments?
Your Worship, I was just going to mention that the issue of noise and light enforcement has been the subject of council discussions on a number of times over the last 3 or 4 years.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Would anybody else like to address the meeting for a first, second, or third time? Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to check in with the clerk. We satisfied the input here this evening. Okay. Thank you very much. And so, as I said, some of the items tonight will be written down into a report, which will be published in the middle of July, I think it is when we're expecting that, hopefully with some additional details that we unfortunately couldn't provide on the spot here tonight. But I want to thank everybody for participating in the input on the annual report. We do appreciate it. The next item up on the agenda is Mr. Stewart's comments and report on the council priorities and the 2023 to 2026 corporate plan. So I'll go to Mr. Stewart.
Your Worship, just as a way of introduction, we have for many years done some form of council priority that covers the term of the council. That's then recorded and distributed to the community and staff, and then it's updated as necessary because none of this is written in stone, and it needs to be flexible. But that being said, it's always a little bit of a longer process when you have a new council, as there needs to be a lot of discussion around perhaps changes in priorities. And so what you end up with is a document that reflects not only what the current council wants to do, but reflects those things that are carried over from previous years. As is, I think, quite obvious, council priorities are then folded into a corporate plan, which is then reflected in the annual report. And what we try to do is provide both council and the community with some kind of a progress update. So you not only have a statement of goals, priorities, objectives, and actions, you also have key progress indicators. And so tonight's introduction of this was really intended to reflect the work that's already happened with council. It was an opportunity for council to raise any additional concerns or issues. And so I would welcome any comments that council members may have. Alternatively, they can always email us. And the intention is in a fairly short order, what we'll do is we'll come back to council with a more truncated version of it, because the one that you've got on table today has a lot of information that we would not normally continue with the plan. It would be in the staff document and the council document, but not necessarily for public consumption. But I'll welcome any comments or concerns. And as I say, this is an ongoing process. And based on what we hear tonight or in the not too distant future, we'll again summarize that and come back to council for a formal adoption. We are doing something a little different this year, and that is rather than it just being a paper document, we're folding it into software, which will be searchable on our webpage. So I think that's a big move forward in terms of making sure that the community not only has access to it, but can from time to time take a look at it and understand what progress we're making on these key areas. So that's all I've got to say at this point, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And just my own comments on the matter, and I'll be happy to, I guess what we're looking for, are we moving receipt or we're just doing feedback at this point?
A motion to receive it, recognizing that it doesn't close it.
Yeah.
It just receives it for the record tonight.
So I'm happy to move receipt of the report. Is there a seconder on the matter? Councillor Hanson. And just my comments on it quickly. I mean, going through it, it's very information dense in the report. But as I went through, it does reflect the priorities both set out in the official community plan and the discussions that we've had as a council since the election about what we want to see take place in our community. And I get that it is not it is a living document, and so as issues arise in our community, we may have to adjust things from time to time. The challenge is always going to be the deliverability in this current environment. We have so many projects that are undergoing such a tremendous amount of escalation of costs. And so I get that while we're talking about principles and priorities, ultimately that should lead into projects that may not be deliverable in our current budgetary constraints. And so, we're constantly going to have to go back to these priorities and have a discussion about how much we want to fund something that is currently shockingly expensive. And so I did just want to say that I appreciate all of the work that staff has put into this project. It does help us refine where we're at on the different priorities and help us remind us of what the priorities have been as set out by the council. So you have my thanks. Councillor Hanson, do you have additional comments on the matter?
Not too many, Your Worship. I agree with the comments you've just made. And I also, just responding to the statement about a more truncated version, I do look forward to a more truncated version, which I think has the potential to better highlight our priorities and our action steps in the near term. So I look forward to that.
Additional comments? Councillor Ma, would you like to comment on the matter?
Sure. I do have some comments, but more in terms of priorities. Something that sticks out to me right away is, well, can I just confirm that in terms of priority, 1, 2, 3, 4, they are in sequence?
Oh. Mr. Stewart?
No, Your Worship, we've got, I think, 6, and they're not listed in order.
Okay.
Because each one of them represents a very different part of our business, and you can't really assume that one is, in some cases, even separate from another. For example, when we talk about housing, we can't do housing without transportation. So there are many of these issues which are really closely linked together.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification, because my point was going to be when I look at artificial turfs, they're priority 4, but they're also a big component of our budget. So I just want to make sure that those are matching, but thank you for clarifying that. Just because it's listed as priority 4 doesn't mean that we'll get to it after we finish off 1, 2, and 3. And
That's
then,
correct. That's best represented in the actual work plans themselves.
right, okay. That's
Great.
it.
Thank you so much. Just checking in, Councillor Forbes, do you have additional comments on the matter?
No, I don't, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much to staff for preparing the reports for consideration tonight, and thank you to the members of the public for all of their submissions. Again, I want to wish everybody a great week. Actually, I should accept adjournment first. Will somebody please, moved by Councillor Hanson, accepted. Thank you all very much and have yourselves a great weekend. Hope you can all get out and celebrate Canada Day with your family and in the community. Councillor Ma, you have a promo you want to put out there, is that?
Yes, there is a Canada Day parade and picnic in Pemberton Heights.
Yes.
Of course, on Saturday, starting at 10:45 at the former United Church and making its way to Southern Park. So hopefully we'll see you there. Okay.
And
yes, starting at 10:45.
And we both participate through donations through the Rotary Club to the event down at the shipyards in the city of North Vancouver. And so that's going to be a large Canada Day event throughout the course of the day there as well. Okay, thank you all so much. Have yourselves a great evening. Good night.